Good morning, all. It's such an honor to stand in front of each and every one of you. You know, as I was sitting there and the previous speakers before me, I was like, what is it that I'm going to tell these phenomenal young people? Because they were echoing the words that I heard as I was trying to prepare to speak to each and every one of you. So I'm actually very honored that the vision that I have for the continent and each and every one of you really was articulated by the previous speakers. So I'm honored to be standing here in front of you, just to stamp it up a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. There's an African proverb from Benin that says, we do not look at another person's clock to work. Simply put, this is what responsible leadership is. It is how you walk to your own clock. As leaders, we all have clocks. We all listen to our call, and we take responsibility to the sound of that clock, because that clock is that you have been called to do, really to ensure that we take our continent further. In the same breath, though, I must caution the young leader that sits before me and believes that they have the ability to walk alone and listen to only one sound and one clock. With that, there's another African proverb that says, if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And with these words, as young Africans, it's our responsibility to take the dream of our Pan-African father, Kwame Nkrumah, and realize it for a united Africa. It is our responsibility as modern-day leaders to build the Africa that is glorious. This will only begin to materialize if we, the young leaders, shed the scars when European leaders met in 1885 and divided our continent in the Berlin Conference, to draw all these borders that separate each and every one of us. What I'm saying to you is, as a leader sitting here today, you should not lead only in your country, but in the region. You should lead in the continent, forget the borders, and collaborate. As such, I plead with you as young leaders sitting in this room, do not fall foul to these borders, but remember that the problems in Namibia are your own. The problems in Zambia, Zimbabwe, Angola, they're your own. We must imbibe the principles of Mozambique's revolutionary leader, Samora Machel, when he said, international solidarity, it's not an act of charity. It is an act of unity between allies fighting on different terrains towards the same objective. With 14 countries represented in this gathering, I ask you to stand in solidarity with one another. You're sitting here, and America has come to you. Stand in international solidarity with them. It is not charity. It is for the development of the ordinary African. Ladies and gentlemen, the liberation struggles have been fought. They sit in parliaments. They reminisce. Those are over. It is now time for us to take our continent forward. We need to understand the most basic of needs of our African people. All this allows you to lead them forward and harness the great potential of our continent. As a young leader, I need you to understand the story of a young Lexan career from Nyasaland, now known as Malawi, The story of a remarkable young man who started his journey in 1958 and walked a distance of over 4,800 kilometers to America. He wanted to be like Booker T. Washington, who had cast off the shackles of slavery to become a great American reformer and educator, giving hope and dignity to himself and to his race. quite like the Mandela Washington Fellows. We have young Africans traveling to America, understanding that we live in a global village. And in such, we need to be global leaders that also understand the needs of our communities on the ground. We need to understand the stories of the young Lexans of today, the young Lexans that are toiling in our various institutions, whether it be in the Namibia University of Science and Technology, whether this young Lexan is sitting in the University of Mauritius or the University of Zambia, or even the Catholic University of Angola, all of which are top institutions within their various countries. We as leaders need to understand the needs of the young men and women within our continent. If it is education, how is it that we embrace the fourth industrial revolution, known as the digital revolution, and create digital solutions in a continent where some people are still living in the second revolution and don't have electricity? We need to think as leaders that we're exposed to a global world. How do we embrace this digital revolution to implement solutions that will meet the most basic of needs of the African sitting at home? How do we increase accessibility to education? In 2015, UNESCO published a report on digital services for education in Africa. In this report, it notes that sub-Saharan Africa has 936 million inhabitants, with 2/3 of its population aged under 25. Universal access to education is still a major challenge on our continent. We need to target solutions to those basic needs. In Kenya, there's a system called the Tangerine system that was developed. What they do is they use a mobile phone to be able to assess a candidate, and therefore the candidate does not need to travel to get a certificate of competence. There is a solution that uses a tablet to help our communities. As we experience the digital revolution, we need to look back and lift our communities. Another African proverb from Tanzania says, "Do not forget what it is to be a sailor because of a captain yourself." As such, let us continually look at our smartphones. Let's look at our tablets, our laptops, even your various activity trackers. Let us look at these simple digital tools and ask ourselves, how can I help my community with this technology? How can a small girl in Chanda, in Comoros, a young boy in the Maluti Mountains of Lesotho be helped by this technology? But I love history. I really, really love history because it tells a story of a young Thomas Sankara. At the age of 33, Sankara ascended to presidents of Upper Volta, the then Upper Volta. He renamed it to say Burkina Faso, which meant the land of the upright. It is with these same eyes that I want you to look at yourselves as African leaders, as upright people. I want to say to you that you are the lineage of such great men, such as Sankara, who were not afraid in their youth to stand up and lead even the oldest in their society. Then Uganda brings me back with a proverb, and it says, "He who fears the sun will not become a chief." As a leader, you will. There's no doubt. You will face challenges. But I would always ask you to remember that it is the light from the sun that causes the moon to shine. So in those quiet moments that we often have, that I often have as a leader, in those dark moments, you must remember that is when you shine the most because the sun is behind you. In 1985, Sankara said, you cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. In this case, it comes from nonconformity, the courage to turn your back on old formulas, the courage to reinvent the future. It took the madman of yesterday for us to be able to act with extreme clarity I want each and every one of you to be those madmen. We must dare to invent the future. The question some of you sit and ask in this room say, but then, how does someone become this mad woman, this madman? How do we begin to improve the social and economic conditions in our communities? Sometimes as a leader, you feel overwhelmed because you feel so much, and that feeling is what causes you to move. I borrow from another proverb from Malawi, and it says, he who thinks he is leading and has no one following him is only taking a walk. So, my definition for leadership is in twofold. Firstly, you need to win the hearts of the people that you lead. Secondly, I believe that a leader must have incredible intellect to be able to lead those who have fallen in love with this vision. I'm not doing my PhD for fun. It's because I know I'm a leader and I'm crafting that incredible intellect to be able to lead those that fall in love with my vision. I'm reminded of a proverb from Ghana, which says, wisdom is not like money. It cannot be tied up and hidden somewhere. As such, as a leader, you need to be able to share this wisdom, this vision that you have, and take people along the journey with you. I understand that to share wisdom, you need to be able to keep your pulse on the people. In my own leadership journey, I go to prisons so that I can meet the men that are in prison. As I talk to them, they share their stories, and I am able to understand the economic woes of my country that can drive others to commit crimes. I can understand how influence can lead to crime, and as such, those young people that I'm interacting with at universities and schools, I understand that I have to role model for them so that the influences that they see, they follow and do not follow crime. Recently, I was in Ghana, and I had the privilege of sitting in an international conference. It was good. Sat at a very nice hotel. I was on a panel with like 4 vice presidents and presidential candidates. But then after that, I was like, enough with that. I went to a school, Kanda cluster of schools, an underprivileged area at Ghana. Because as a leader, you must be able to sit at the helm, and you must also be able to keep your pulse at the bottom of society. That is what breeds the humility, because you cannot always sit at the helm and not go down to the people. When I got to the school, out of 200 students, I said, who knows what an architect is? Only one put up their hand in the school. Called him to the front, explained to them. He says, an architect builds, draws houses. I then continued to read in one of my books that I've written about an African architect. And it was beautiful because every line that I read, I said to them, say it after me, so that I know that they are hearing what I'm saying. Afterwards, they all knew what an architect was. I believe that that seed that I planted in Ghana, 20, 30 years from now, I see them sitting amongst the Mandela Washington Fellows. One young man out of that group, or one young woman, is going to be building buildings for their communities because a mad woman from South Africa dared to imagine an Africa where our kids know about all the available opportunities to them, where our kids can dream without limits. We must, as African leaders, remain bothered by the inequalities that exist in our societies. The inequality impedes the development of our continent. There's a working paper that was produced by the African Development Bank. You should all read it. It asks a question. It says, why is inequality so high in Africa? In this paper, they talk about the concept of the inequality of opportunity. They talk about the basic idea of inequality of opportunity is the fact that the inequality of outcomes between households, such as income, assets, or education, are determined by two key factors. The individual has some degree of control, that is choice, effort. Then there's another one where they can't control it, and this can only be corrected through public action. And if this is not corrected through public action, it can lead to social tension, resentment, and even conflict in your environment. As young leaders, I'm saying to you, and I know it's not sexy these days, we need to raise up our hands and go into public office, because we are the leaders that need to govern. Is there anyone from Mauritius? Please put up your hands. You know how Facebook shares memories, right? Today I went to my memory, and your president was elected, it was today, right? What's his name? Yes. And you know what I wrote on my status at that day? I said it is beautiful when academics meets politics, and we need more academics in our governing institutions. We cannot sit on the side and think that we're going to get a better country, a better continent, if we don't sacrifice who we are. So as young leaders, you need to be able to be in those public action offices to correct the ills that we have. If you do not do that, you will not be able to quell or even eliminate the social tension in Quincy Village in the Seychelles. It needs to be an undertaking for you as a young leader to offer your wisdom, to lead. For us to truly unlock Africa's potential, we need to mobilize as young people. We need to take up our spaces in places that were seen as traditionally places for elders. I had the honor of meeting Mona Pelham Youngblood from Liberia. I spent some time with her. She was elected at 27 years as the youngest politician in Liberia's history, defeating 20 other candidates. She was selected as one of the 50 most prominent Liberian women, and she's one of the most influential voices in Liberia. What struck me about Mona, though, and what ended up creating this bond between the two of us, is when she sat and told me how she went from being a model to being a lawmaker. She told me about a young activist that came to their offices, and people didn't pay attention to them. And she went and embraced this young boy, only for this young boy to get a radio slot and be able to mobilize young people in their country and be recognized internationally. She told me stories about how fulfilling it is to serve, because the people in her constituency knock on her door day and night. Such selfless giving. Ironically, she's the tallest woman in Liberia. And tall in stature as she sits amongst the ranks of the wise. As a young African leader, I need you to understand that. I need to understand the Liberian landscape. I need to understand the Swaziland landscape. I need you to understand how you can leverage each other sitting here to build economies, to build your own countries, and to build the continent. The AU Summit this year was hosted under a theme, harnessing the demographic dividend through investments in youth. If there ever was a time for young people to lead, it is today. The AU gets together and talks about us. They talk about investing in us. This is the time. In 2013, it was estimated that 200 million people aged 15 and 24 live in Africa. We're the continent with the youngest population. Why aren't we leading? The current trend indicates that by 2045, it will double. There's a report by the African Economic Outlook that was prepared by experts from the African Development Bank, UNDP, UN Economic Commission for Africa, and OECD that says that we are a population that's rising. This is our time to lead. We cannot. We're in the majority. We cannot sit back. We cannot comfortably sit, check in here, tweet here, take selfies. No. It is time for us to contribute to the environment. that will see us create jobs. There's a 15-year-old boy now in Matabele land, north in Zimbabwe. He needs to wake up to a Zimbabwe that has jobs created by the very leaders sitting in this room. And I must understand that the 15-year-old boy in Matabele North in Zimbabwe is my problem. A girl from Mafikeng in South Africa. He's an African, I am an African. We will not see the Africa that we want if you sit and toil in Tolira in Madagascar, or you sit in Mababane in Swaziland and believe that as a leader, you are coming up with solutions for your little community or your little country. No, I must understand that another African's problems are my problems. When we look at NEPAD, which is a technical arm of the AU, they believe in regional integration. It is one of the keys to developing our continent. According to the World Economic Forum, the potential gains from an increased regional integration in Africa are substantial. Almost half of Africa's 54 countries have a population of less than 10 million. The world. We cannot harness our power until we come together. Thus, it is important that you understand, that as young leaders sitting here, that there's a need that you come up with optimal regional solutions when it comes to energy generation, healthcare, transportation, and education, the basic needs. Regional integration will help African countries to better set their priorities and strategize. I humbly ask you to harness the vision of this great program. This is what regional integration is. Different countries, united under one common vision. You need to understand that too much has been given, much is expected. You have a network in other African countries. Start to unite now. Don't wait for some SADC whatever. No, it is your responsibility sitting here. The realization of a prosperous Africa lies in our hands. It lies in us understanding that we are young Thomas Sankaras. We are young Winnie Mandelas. It lies in us understanding that we need to play an active role in our societies, day in and day out. We should not be paralyzed as young people and think about governments and think about the AU, UN, and we're sitting there waiting for a silver plate. The world owes you nothing. It is about you translating everything that you are feeling, that clock, for your people. In closing, I'm addressing an audience that is mainly made up of youth. I would like to paint you a picture of that I see. I see a young Sam Nujoma of Namibia, a young Abdullah Abrimani of Comoros. I see a young Gracia Michel of Mozambique. I see a young Amina Gurub of Mauritius. I see before me a young, defiant Kenneth Kaunda. And as I turn to my other side, I see a young Joyce Mujuru of Zimbabwe. I see before me a young Holden Roberto of Angola. I'm in awe as I look straight ahead and I cast my eyes and I see a young Joyce Banda from Malawi. As my brush touches this beautiful canvas, I look further into the room. And who do I see? I see a young Matabiso Mosula, who has championed Basotho women's rights since 1963. I see a young Jan Setole of Swaziland. In this very, very room, I see an Omar Beriski of Madagascar. I'm hopeful that the continent will see its glory days. As I look, I see a young Danny Fora of the Seychelles. I see men and women in this room with the same vigor, who are prepared to roll up their sleeves. Fellows, my painting ends with a young Nelson Mandela. I will hang this portrait in my mind, as I know that all of you will leave a legacy, not for your generation, but for coming generations. I'm reminded of a song by a strong Pan-African songstress, Ndilija Kijo of Senegal, when she says, "Who sees the beauty in Mama Africa? Don't cross your arms and stand still. We have work to do, day and night, to make you stronger, Mama Africa." With those words, fellows, I challenge you to have no fear, to go back to your communities, to challenge your thinking. Think about the fellow sitting next to you, the fellow sitting before you, the fellow sitting behind you. My challenge is to seek solutions, not only for that small community, not only for that country, but I want you to see how you can collaborate with the fellow beside you. Let us amplify our reach. Let the voices of the Mandela Washington Fellows be heard. In so doing, the youth of this continent will be beneficiaries of your hard work. Let us build the Africa we want. Let it rain, let it rain. Lebogang. Thank you.